Hey guys, welcome to the Troy Gramling podcast. So glad you're with us today. Video version of this podcast is on YouTube, and then, of course, we're on all the platforms. We have been talking to some of the folks who've been a part of Potential Church for the last, different amounts of times. We're celebrating 45 years, and today you're in for a special treat because we have Pastor Hal Mayer, who was the executive pastor. All right, so let's talk. Tell us a little bit about when you came to Potential, which was Flamingo at the time. What year was that, and kind of what was going on in the life of the church?
Yeah, that was 1992, and it was a weird time because just as I came to Flamingo at that time, Hurricane Andrew came through, and so we're trying to figure that out, right? And we suddenly turn into the place the church was for all the food being dropped off to be then shipped down into to Lower Miami and to help people deal with all the problems they were having. So it was wild because we would have that set up in the auditorium. We'd be meeting in there, and in the old youth auditorium there, and it was just funny to have all that there. But we were going after it, so it was a lot of fun. We were making trips every day down there, taking water and food.
So you guys kind of all got thrown together at once then in the midst of that.
We did.
Who was here then, as far as staff goes?
Dan, Gar, Alan, and me.
Okay.
And that was it. And, Dan has this huge heart. And so he didn't even hesitate. I'm thinking, and he's already deciding we're going to do the right thing. And he was absolutely on point while I was still back there thinking, oh, is this the best way? So it was a great move, solidified the church around mission and such as that. So it was good. We had just also moved the Sunday morning, not yet. We were getting ready to move Sunday morning to Cooper City High School.
Now, is that when you rebuilt or put in the balcony?
No,
that building?
It was when we did that the first building I built or helped build. The one with the walkway around it. I think the youth meet in there now.
Yep.
But before they met in there, they met over in the what's cafetorium or whatever it is.
So when you got here, they were still meeting in the original building per se?
Now, we were doing Saturday night and Sunday morning and just needed more space and to try this thing while we were going to build something. And so we moved to the high school. And then what was crazy was you're doing Saturday night in your building and you're packing it all up and getting over there and on Sunday morning. So it wasn't just being portable. It was moving stuff every Sunday.
Wow.
Over there. So, but that gave us I think we were there 2 or 3 years before we built, but that really gave us a chance to try new things and to let the church know we were whatever it takes, not just going to take it. So those were some great times, wild times. I mean, set up and tear down and putting out signs. So
now, did you do the Saturday night the whole few years there here on the property, and then at the high school on the Sunday morning?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And then you built what is now where the youth meet. Right. Went into there and quickly outgrew that, and then you had to build the balcony.
Well, yeah, we were doing 4 services in there, and just thought we've got to do something, and we built the balcony. I won't mention names here, but the guy who built it said he could get us a temporary CO, which there's no such thing as that. I didn't know that back then. And so we met out front while they poured the footings for the columns for the balcony. We met in a tent out in front just for 2 weeks. And then we're inside by the grace of God. We never got shut down or nothing. It was all safe, but man, it was crazy.
So what time of the year was that when y'all met in that tent?
It was summer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good times.
Post-COVID, I think the world's commitment level to church, I don't think makes room for a tent in the middle of summer in South Florida.
You got that right. Not in South Florida. But, momentum makes up for a lot of difficulties or even bad choices. When you've got it, everything looks great. We're brilliant, and then you don't have it. You can make great decisions. You go, what's going on? Well, we had momentum right then. And so whatever we did, people were for it. I
Mm.
mean, they kept coming. So it was crazy.
Now, what do you think, created that? Because, you guys had several years of really great growth and reaching people. And what do you think created that
You
momentum?
know, we were probably, I think we were the first church to fully transition. And so you had that happening.
Mhm.
Pembroke Pines was growing rapidly. And then Hurricane Andrew came down and pushed a lot of people up north. And so I think we were the benefit of all that stuff happening. Plus, we were fairly ready as far as growth minded. We weren't trying to stall the growth. There was a church down the street that brought in a young pastor. I remember, and when he came in, the church said, "We're only going to do one service," because what they saw happen at Flamingo with the transition, because so many people came, we were able to transition it fairly easily. And they were growing, and this poor guy was killing himself. And I said, "Man, you got out of service." He said, "No, they won't let me."
Mhm.
So what happened was the church was so for growth at Flamingo. We transitioned, a very formal church into very contemporary. Music style was as contemporary as anywhere, and Dan was Dan, just a great preacher. And we were very fortunate. We were out there on the edge. There weren't really any big churches out there then. There were a couple, in Flamingo, when we went out there, it was kind of a country church. If you look at the old buildings before we did a
Right.
lot of the regional, structured that way, built that way. So we were the first. And then Saturday night, nobody was doing Saturday night back then, kind of like now.
Mhm. Yeah.
we saw what Saturday night does to staffs and all that stuff. And so, people moved away from that. But back then, we were the first in reaching so many people. Well, a lot of Catholics who were used to going to church on Saturday night. That just opened up the floodgates. We at one time, Troy, had a split of 48% of the attendance on Saturday night and 52% on Sunday morning, which to me was amazing.
Right. Yeah.
And it
That is.
wasn't like it was great. I mean, as we look back, we're much more strategic than we were when we were in the middle, right? I
Yeah.
mean, in the middle of it, you're just kind of making it up as you go.
Yeah. No, that's because I got here kind of after y'all had done the whole all of so much of the transformation and there's always pain, but some of the pain that goes in with that. Tell us a little bit about that, because I'm sure along the way, as you guys made that change, there's always those who don't want to necessarily go along, and I think people maybe that are listening that are not maybe as involved in ministry realize the amount of pain that's that you're called, you love these folks, and sometimes it can get pretty ugly. And so how did you deal with that?
That's the thing, Troy. That surprised when I became a lead pastor, I suddenly realized it's personal when people leave, because what they're leaving is not God. They're leaving your translation of the vision. Now, when I was down there, it was tough, but I can remember putting my hand on Dan's back and going, "Listen, it's okay. We're going to go straight ahead." But I wasn't the tip of the spear.
Mm.
I wasn't getting the hate mail and some of those conversations. And you're right, it's heartbreaking, because you really believe you're interested in reaching people far from God. And we started reaching them by the droves then. And to have people object, we didn't do it well, I'm sure. We were most of us in our 30s, and and sometimes we were just charging straight
Right.
ahead and left the body count behind. But in hindsight, there's some things I wish we could have done. I would have done better. But the truth is, what I've discovered in years and years of ministry is people are going to leave you no matter what you do. So do what you believe God's calling you to do. Then they're leaving for that reason instead of your most recent hairstyle or shirt you wore or something you said.
Right.
So, but
And so
that's
many
that's
times,
probably
go ahead.
no. I think that's the hardest thing in ministry that people don't realize, because they'll leave and go, "Hey, it's not personal," but it is,
Yeah.
and it's a deep wound. Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
I saw
It's
a
hard.
thing the other day. I think Ed Young said this. The average person loses 7 close friends in their lifetime. Did you see this?
No, I did not.
Yeah. And then it said the average pastor loses 7 a year. So the emotional and spiritual drain is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, how have you over the years have you figured out and dealt with it? You think maybe more effectively, or it's just part of it, or has it taken its toll? I mean, how do you stay open to people even today after walking through that?
Yeah, I had to become even more open, Troy. We were young. I'm not going to say anything else. I was young and I was gung ho, and we're going to get this done. I mean, I remember one time saying, "Listen, if everybody leaves, we'll just start a church. I can get a job, and we're going to do this." We were so committed to that. What I have learned through time, I think, is sometimes conversations will help in being open. Not always, and you can't listen to everybody who's coming after you, who's attacking. I mean, if it's somebody who cares, yeah, I get that. But so for me, Troy, I have tried to be the guy who is now open more. So I've told people I don't yell at people. I don't do that. In fact, here's a funny story, Pastor Troy. We were starting the church over in Tampa, and we had one of our young staff guys. He was 20, and some guy was arguing with him in the parking lot. And so we're in staff and we're debriefing it. And I just said, "Guys, let me just tell you this. Don't ever raise your voice." I never raised my voice in a disagreement. And the young guy looked at me and he said, "That's because," I said, "they never yell at me." He said, "That's because they're afraid you're going to eat their children." For those of you who don't know, I'm 6'5", and so I'm a rather large human. And that was fun. But I have had to work hard, Troy. One of the things in learning of the initial perception of me, how do I soften it? How do I change it to who I really am? Because I'd get feedback when I was at Flamingo that said, "Wow, when you first came here, you were really hard, but you're really a nice guy now. You've really changed over 2 years." And really, I hadn't.
Right.
They just got to know me. But what I realized was when you're big and tall, you got a big voice and you're demonstrative, you're perceived as that, and there you go.
Well, and I think, one of the things that I, again, learned from you is you're a truth teller. And I think, sadly, we're often not used to that. It's always amazes me. You can talk to somebody and say, "Hey, did you talk to them about blah, 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 whatever it is?" And they always say they did, and then you talk to the other person and they went so, around the mulberry bush that nobody really ever knew what was communicated.
I have gotten better at telling the truth, though. In a way, I want to deliver it in a way that it's received, because, harsh truth without a preparation is just difficult. So, man, if I'm talking difficult, that's not even a word, but we just made it up right here on the Pastor Troy Gramling.
There you
Tough
go.
and difficult, difficult. Quote me on that. One of the things I have learned, if I was giving you challenging feedback, I'd say, "Listen, I've got some challenging feedback. I just want to know if you're interested in it or not." And I haven't had anybody say no, but that just means they understand what's coming rather than just say, boom. It helps them prepare for it. So that's probably a big learning on that.
Yeah. No, but I think, it's so important to create those kind of environments where you can have those kind of conversations so everybody can actually, grow. And that I've always appreciated that about you. When I first got here, of course, being brand new, maybe it's that I'm almost as tall as you are. Maybe that's why I wasn't quite as.
No, you're a big guy.
But I appreciated, that any conversation that I had with you, you were going to tell me exactly what you thought about whatever it was, the idea, or, and I could disagree or whatever, but at least you go out of the room kind of knowing where everybody's at, and you're not surprised later. Because that's, I think, the hardest thing about any relationship is if you and I have a conversation and I assume we're going, this is where it ended, and then later you find out, that that's not the way you felt, I think can cause a lot of pain along the way. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the other thing I think about often is the value you put on asking questions. I know you've written a couple of books about that very thing. So, well, first of all, just tell us the name of those books so we can get that out there.
Oh, okay. The name of the book I just finished is Smart Ask. I just happen to have this. I don't keep it right here, Troy.
Smart ass.
Smart ass questions that lead your team to win. And actually, I'm going back and forth calling you Troy and Pastor Troy. I just remember you as Troy.
That's
So
fine.
nobody be offended on here. Actually, I don't know if you'll remember, I came down and did some training for you guys in how to ask questions. And in that, I invited one to demonstrate the model. I invited, I think it was your preschool leader at the time, up, and we kind of walked through it. That's what's outlined in the book. Now, I don't name the church there because I didn't want to embarrass anybody or anything like that. I guess I now have. But that was the model to use, because what I discovered was, if I don't get your feet under the table on a decision, then I'll get, you'll comply, but you don't buy in. If I want buy-in, I've got to get what you're thinking, what you're feeling, so we can come together. And that's only going to happen if I'm asking questions to bring you in so that you feel heard. Doesn't mean we do everything that you say, but what it does mean is you get a chance to have your voice in the project. And at the end of the day, we get better decisions when we get more people involved. And that's still the toughest thing in businesses I coach now and churches I coach now. People are afraid to tell the truth. And as a result, often the leader doesn't mind, M-I-N-E, for disagreement. And so sometimes decisions are born before they're ready.
No, that's good. And because, like you said, mine is a good word, because it takes a lot of effort to get someone to truly, feel that they're being heard, but at the same time not. Because, the tendency for folks, for all of us, I guess, is to feel we're only being heard that if you do what I say. You know what I mean? So to feel like I'm being heard, even if you don't take my suggestion, seems like a much more challenging task.
I agree. It is. And it's challenging on two sides, because some people aren't sure the leader wants it. And some people are insecure and they want to be liked. So they're not going to disagree. And it just makes for boring meetings because nobody disagrees.
Yeah.
That's the smartest thing I've ever heard, and let's go do it. And, there probably could be a couple of adjustments along the way. But so I found questions to be that. And the other thing I found with it is, in this case of the model used in the book, when somebody who's an expert in an area is struggling with a decision, it's not because they don't have expertise. It's because they don't have all this stuff coming. It's the fog of war. I mean, it's you at the free. Well, I don't know whether you were the case, but it's Shaq. It's somebody at the free throw line, makes 20 in a row in practice, gets in the game and hits 55%. Nothing's changed, except now you've got this fog of people around the room watching, and you never missed any free throws. It was me.
Of course not.
And so questions help them focus and push stuff away. And that's what I did with her. I asked questions and she was able to focus. She had a great idea and it worked. And and gave me a response. I think she picked up 35 leaders that weekend.
Wow.
And it was an idea that I never would have gone for, but she's the expert. She knows the culture better than I do. So why not let them? And her buy-in was out the roof because it was her idea.
Right. No, that's, and I just remember, you've always valued that. And I think I've seen it make a difference, and you got to be patient, if you're going to, and I think you have to be, I've always tried to be honest, and we'll move on here, but I always try to be honest about, if I've already made my decision, I don't want to pretend that I haven't. So you feel then devalued.
So good. Oh man, I've watched guys already have the decision made. And then after a while, everybody figures it out and they go. So my question would be sometimes the lead pastor, is this a done deal or do we discuss? It's done. Okay, let's not waste energy discussing. Let's just do it. I mean, salute and execute, right? So I appreciate you doing that. That's a great way to lead.
Well, thank you. Now let's talk about, you were down here for, how many years were you here at? 10. And then you went to Middle Florida, the Ocala, Orlando, for those who are listening, in that kind of area. What did you see, or did you see any difference in the people that you guys were reaching, or the?
Oh yeah, the diversity in South Florida is so good. I mean, I love the Latino culture. I even started practicing Spanish, embarrassed my kids, but the Spanish speaking people loved that I would try.
Mm,
And it was only a try. But the diversity down there was so good. And being outside of the South, there's a lot of permission to try new things.
mm,
Where the farther you come north, actually the farther you go south in Florida, and diversity is not close yet. It's coming. Uh, but even ideas, I think, are more open when you don't have a church history as opposed when there is one.
mm. No, that's good. So then you went from there. Then you went kind of back down south on the other side of the state,
I
over
went to
to
Tampa and planted a church. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So tell us
And
what were some
and
of those.
you guys helped with that. Thank you.
Oh, it was an honor, really. So tell us a little bit about because how long were you up in Ocala?
I wasn't there but about 2.5 years.
But you're getting what? And were you ever a student pastor before
I was
you came?
actually 3 years. I was up. Yes, I was. I was before seminary, and during seminary, but then I moved out of students. But I was over 30 at that age. So
So you're 15 to 20 years in ministry when you started to launch the church, somewhere in there,
oh no, I was 50 when I launched the church.
were you? So anyways, you've been in ministry a lot, but not in that role. So
Right.
what are some of the things that you surprised you about that role?
Well, the personal feeling of people leaving just blew me up, and I thought,
Mm.
wow. And I had to go back and apologize to pastors that said, relax. Um, the other stuff that I learned there, that leadership is my primary gift, I think. And I thought that would be the piece of cake. It'd be preaching, because I'm used to preaching about once a month. Every week it was going to be tough. It was exactly opposite. I
Mm.
found out I could preach every weekend, and leading would just drain me.
Mm.
So I needed, so we had a team around me, but the drain was bigger. And plus I was older, I was over 50. And what I found was I could either preach or lead, but I didn't have enough energy to do both fully. And I thought, man, this leading, I'm going to do training and development with staff and all this stuff. And what I realized was, when you're preparing for the weekend and the time you need to do that and get with God and get your mind around it, it's a lot of day-to-day stuff you don't see.
Mm. And it's
So
such an
that was,
emotional,
oh,
you're there, and who shows up. I mean, that's going to affect you whether it's a little group or a big group. I mean, we all know we're doing it for God, and whether there's two people
right.
out there, but still emotionally, you're putting all this time, this energy and effort, and it's like bringing your child to show and nobody shows up to see it, and then people's response and
I,
um,
I was surprised because at Flamingo, I'd done 5 weekend services, and
mhm.
Monday I was fine. But we're going along, and I guess we're in two. And Sandy's talked to my wife, Sandy, is saying, you're kind of hard to deal with on Sunday afternoon and Monday morning. Is something okay? Is something not right? And she thought I wasn't right with God or something. And so she calls Mary Sutherland, who's Dan's wife, and Dan's like one of the kindest people you'll ever meet. I mean, you want him to introduce you because he'll introduce you as better than you are, that. And so she calls Mary and talks to her about it. And Mary says, "You mean poke the bear?" And
Hmm.
Sandy went, "Really?" She said, "Oh yeah, Sunday afternoon he's kind of vegging. Monday afternoon he comes back to life." And that's when Sandy realized, oh, but that drain was a surprise to me. You're right, the
Hmm.
emotional drain.
Yeah, it's and I think anybody that's, especially any kind of presentation, there's an art to it. And I think because it's subjective, we both played sports, and then even as executive pastor, there's money numbers. So I mean, the win and the loss is easily defined. Where
Right.
when you're presenting something, you're gonna have one person come up and say it was the worst thing they ever heard. They don't agree, and then the other person's gonna say, "Man, God used that to change my life." And
Right.
and you're just kind of figuring out, what do you do with that emotionally? Not so much mentally, because you can mentally you got goals that you're going after and everything, but emotionally, for me, that's always,
Oh,
the challenge. And
yeah.
for sure. So anyways, what are you doing now?
2.5 years ago, I retired from full-time staff ministry role. I was executive pastor at the Springs, and actually was kind of burned out just because I never took time.
Mm.
For example, you weren't there when I buried both my parents, I don't think. Buried both of them were you? I don't
I
remember.
think when your father died, I think I had just gotten here.
Okay. My dad and mom died within 3 months of each other. I didn't take any time off for that. I'm Hal Mayer. I fight through. Transitioned up here to church at the Springs. They were in a tough time, so I didn't take any time off. And I've had a record of that. Well, by the time I got to the end, nothing was fun anymore.
Mm.
And so I took a couple months, just did nothing and prayed. And then I was going to jump into starting this coaching thing. And God just kind of said, nah. So I let people know where I was going. And then I started getting calls and started coaching. What I determined was I was only going to do what's life-giving for me.
Mm.
So I coach, I'll do strategy planning. I'll do team coaching, culture, environment, all that stuff with businesses. And I'm doing it with churches. I love that. And so whenever it becomes something that's not life-giving, I stop, which makes me a better coach. But I found out, man, I just love that edge. In fact, here's where it started. I don't know if you know Chip Judd. It's Seacoast Church, large church up there.
Right. I know Seacoast.
Yeah. And so he and I were at a meeting. I was lead pastor over in Tampa, but we're in a meeting with church planners up in North Georgia. And he looked at me and he said, guys like you and me need to come off the stage. And he said, we've got to pour into the lives of these younger guys because and then he said, because there's fatherlessness at a level we haven't seen. 2 levels. He said, one, these guys had an absent father in their physical life, or a dad who was not close, or they don't have a father in the ministry. He said, and they need guys like us who've been at it a long time and stuff like that. So he planted that seed in me 8 years before I did it. But God used that to remind me that, yeah, I want to plow in. So what I love doing, I'm coaching several church planters right now and their staffs. I'm on staff of 2 churches out in California.
You're just following Dan's example. That's what you're doing.
Yeah. So, yeah, but I go to their staff meetings and I coach their staff. And what's fun for me is I know where they are and I can speak in and say, listen, you're in a time right now that's totally draining and it's going to wear you out. And then we get into strategy, we can get into best practices. But what I didn't want to be was a consultant. I do that some, but you go in and you tell people stuff to do, but I really wanted to be involved in the change process. So I've done that with businesses too. It's really fun to see them change a culture, and suddenly from having a 50% turnover a year, it drops down to under 10%.
Wow. Now, were you doing it during COVID as well? Were you doing some of that during COVID?
No. I've always coached a little bit.
Right.
But I might have been coaching one person during COVID. But COVID is really what opened it up for me. Because before that, so much of it was in person.
Right.
You know what? No, I was not coaching anybody, but in-person coaching pre-COVID. But I was on staff full time too. I didn't come off staff until after COVID. But Zoom opened it up for all of us to get out there and people say, yeah, it works. And then you go out physically sometimes too. But it's been that allowed. COVID was an interesting bear.
Yeah, still is in lots of ways. So
I guess it's coming back.
Yeah.
And we can't say anything about it on either side.
No. I always say the interesting thing to me about that time period has been the enemy, and in my lifetime I had not seen it, where the enemy divided us in the church, about things we agree on. We all agree racism's bad, but there were what's anti-racism, and there was, division over that. We all think COVID is bad, but it all became political, So if you wear a mask, this means this. If you don't wear a mask, it means, and the enemy did a great job. It's one thing to divide people over stuff they disagree about, but to divide them over things that, they agree about is a whole nother level. And seen a lot of that, during that time period. So
it was amazing. Pastors go after other pastors, either because they're wearing masks or they weren't. And I'm going, oh man. And you're right, man. The enemy had a field day, just turning us against each other.
Yeah.
And fear. Oh.
All right. Hey, I would love to have you on sometime and us just talk about parenting, because I learned a lot from you about that.
I would love to. And in fact, I probably have better insight now because my kids aren't at home. But I am a grandfather, so that's always fun watching that. And one thing I've learned there, Troy, you're not a grandfather yet.
Oh, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right.
I got 2 grandkids.
Feedback that's not asked for is seen as criticism. So, and it's tough for me. My kids are doing well, but there's times I go, hey, if they don't ask, I got to stop, because I value my kids' relationship more than being right.
Yeah.
And I want to say thanks to you. Thanks for inviting me back in. I've been down there to speak a couple times since forever ago, and you guys helped partner with us, and I appreciate that. Doesn't leadership does stuff down there for you too. So thanks for the opportunity to still tag back into a place I really love. Some of the best days of ministry for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're grateful as well. As grateful for the foundation, you guys. I think about the 4 you mentioned, and then Mark Gilman, because that's basically the executive team when I got here, and that foundation, and it, has led to lots of opportunities for us, and we'll see what the future holds. But I would love to for us to spend 30 minutes just talking about parenting, because a lot of people struggle there, and you had a lot of things that I've never forgotten that, and I tell everybody here, they get tired of hearing it, but that you don't know how good a parent you are until your kids have kids, and that's that's forever on my mind. So I do I appreciate that thought as well as others. So we'll get a date and then just talk about parenting and grandparenting. Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation, kind of going back, talking about what's happened over the last, not 45 years, but a few decades. And then also talking a little bit about leadership and life. And be sure and share the link with somebody. And we'll see you next Thursday right here on the Troy Gramling podcast. Have a great week. We'll see you, Pastor Hal.